What Drives You is brought to you by Ziglar, your premier source for equipping life and leadership coaches. Visit Ziglar.com and let them inspire your true coaching performance.
Yeah.
Welcome to What Drives You. I'm Kevin Miller, your host and your guide to help you master your inner drive so you can live a driven, inspired, and peaceful life that sees you driving further and enjoying the ride. In this episode, we begin a series on Happierness, is what I've decided to call it, Arthur. As you're about to hear, we can't live a meaningful life and just be in a state of happy all the time. We'd actually miss out on some of the most rich aspects of our existence. And as I have learned from our guest here, probably die early as well. But amongst the necessary challenges of life, we can absolutely be happier, which improves literally everything. So my guest, expert here on the topic, who's back for the second time, which I'm incredibly honored by, is Arthur Brooks. His book, Strength to Strength, has been pivotal for me. I brought it up in the shows. If you listen to me much, you've heard it a lot of times, and it's been so powerful to so many others that I have been in union with. And that was the focus of our first series together. So Arthur's a professor of management practice at Harvard Business School, where he teaches renowned courses on happiness. His incredibly popular How to Build a Life column at The Atlantic was found and followed by Oprah Winfrey, and now Arthur and Oprah have written a book together titled Build the Life You Want, The Art and Science of Getting Happier. I really encourage you to check that book out. You can find it anywhere, of course. Arthur also has a new online workshop called The Art and Science of Happiness. You can find that at scienceofhappier.com. But the more happiness you experience, the more your drive is fueled, which you know that's what this show is about. That's our focus today. So Arthur, just an honor and a joy to have you back.
Thank you for having me back, Kevin. And the honor is really mine. I've been looking forward to it. It was one of the best conversations about how about the last book. Can't wait for this conversation about the new book.
Well, I can't either. It is incredibly timely. And I want to hit off on some high notes to start off with. I mean, this topic of happiness, has been so much in the limelight for so long. In studying your book here that you and Oprah have put together, and just your continued research, I feel, and I want to see if I'm on the right track. I feel like your overall mission is to help us conceptualize that happiness is, again, not just that feeling, but it's a set of known, tangible ingredients that we can quantify and harness at any time, especially in regardless of our circumstances.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's absolutely right. One of the things that I find that, I thought originally when I started studying very seriously the science of happiness, or the social science around it, and even the neuroscience around it, that people just didn't have the solutions to getting happier. I found that the real problem is people don't even know what it is. They actually don't know what happiness is, and they're making all kinds of mistakes just in the definition and the concept of happiness. And so that's really where the conversation starts. You can get a lot happier by reconceptualizing what the goal is. People say, I just want to be happy. Well, no, I don't know. Do you really want to get rid of all your negative emotions, your fear, your anger, your sadness, and disgust that you mentioned in the intro? You'd be dead in a week if you didn't have negative emotions. They keep you alive. Do you want to get rid of all your negative experiences from which you get your learning and growth? Presumably not. And so we start off with rational expectations about what we even want in our lives. And we go from there to getting not happy, but happier. And that's really manageable.
And that is, and again, I love that term. I got that from you. That's what I'm going to title it, Happierness. We have one of my best friends and often a co-host on the show is a doctor. He's a medical doctor, but functional medicine doctor. And he talks about nobody's going to be perfectly well, but we can all be weller. And we actually have a corporation, and it's called Wellerness. And so Happierness was a great fit in here. Well, Arthur, as you started off when we first got on, you knew some things were going on in my life. So if I can, we want to hear from you, but I'm going to lead with a story here. Before I, book a guest, I review their book, of course. So when I was asked about having you back on the show, I didn't need to. Of course, you're going to come on the show. So I just did it, didn't think about it. At some point, they sent the book, and I generally really get into it the week before I do a show, so it's fresh on my mind. Well, I found myself out of state on a sudden errand and didn't have it with me. I actually bought it at a bookstore in Sarasota, Florida a few days ago. And as there was a lot of events happening, I didn't crack it. And I'll tell you, it's right here. It's dog-eared. It got wet, and I read it front to back in the past 24 hours. Wow. Because, well, here's that. You start the story off. You start chapter 1 off with the story of Carnegie Mellon University professor Randy Pausch, and him getting, I think at age 47, a life-ending diagnosis. So here he is in the prime of life, in essence, of pancreatic cancer at the age of 47. And from that, he wrote the last lecture. I read that first chapter about 24 hours ago. And here's the kicker of that. The event that I was away on that had taken me away from that, we were actually supposed to record yesterday, and we postponed it today because I was flying back. On December 8th, which as this recording is December 20th of 2023, on December 8th, my 76-year-old father, Dan Miller, he's a well-known author and influencer, author of the 48 Days to the Work You Love book that Dave Ramsey's been promoting for 2 decades. He's sold over 2 million copies and has been looking forward to the next 20 years of writing. In really good health, but he went into the hospital with some gallbladder issues and was surprised with a diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. So that was, that was December 8th. So I flew out on December 9th. My family converged there and went through the meetings. And it was actually just this past Monday, so 2 days ago, that we had the final meeting after the PET scan to make sure of the diagnosis fully. And it's in the pancreas, it's in the liver, and it's in his bones. And so he's being given 6 months, and give or take, whatever. So I took pictures on the plane, Arthur, of the first pages of your book and sent it to him and said, go get the book. Now, to come to find out that my dad he's well aware, and he's been reading about Randy as well. So it felt incredibly divine, because here we are. So we're going along, lots to be happy for, lots to be grateful for, and yet Dad's going to die quickly, which changes my mom's life, the next 20-year trajectory. He's got, how do you know how many grandkids? 15, 20? I don't know. He's got a lot. It's going to change a lot of things. And so here we are. We're going, gosh, we're supposed to, count our blessings, but this sucks. This is bad. And this is where it hits. So here we are, happy, really? Because when circumstances happen and we have these emotions, we believe they're true, and that what we're experiencing is fact. And not to take away from that, but go there. I mean, that's, I want to work through, I've been just flat out studying the book and sharing bits and pieces with my dad and my family about that. But we're at this, and we get it. My dad's been preaching this kind of stuff for a long time. And now he's also sitting there going, well, now we're going to see if I really practice what I preach. This is where it really hits the fan. And there we go. So we can give head nods to this stuff. But then when that thing happens in our life, to, as you say, choose your emotion, choose your perspective, feel like we get that, we can give a head nod to it. And when it comes down to it, it feels so illogical. Yeah. And you say that in essence in the book.
Absolutely. And I'm so sorry to hear about your dad. I mean, your whole family's going through an incredible upheaval, and the next 6 months are going to be, well, you can't predict what they're going to be. I mean, your father's going to go through a lot of emotional turmoil, and so are all of you. And my guess is you're all going to draw closer together than you've ever been before. And you're going to have memories that you're going to cherish till the very end of your life. You're going to see one of the great blessings your father's going to give you is what the end of life is supposed to look like for a good man.
Yeah.
Who's beloved by his family. But that still is not going to take away the pain. And I know you don't want to take away the pain, Kevin, because that wouldn't be appropriate. This is a point that a lot of people need to understand. People always say, I don't want to feel sad. Well, yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. I mean, there's a good evolutionary reason for you to be sad from time to time, to be, bereaved when you're in the absence of the people that you love. Because if you didn't feel that sadness, your marriage wouldn't last, and your friendships wouldn't last, and your employment wouldn't last, quite frankly. Yeah. But more to the point, you want to experience the fullness of your life. Saint Irenaeus, the great Catholic saint from the 4th century, one time he said that the glory of God is a person fully alive. He didn't say the glory of God is a person who's just like bubbly with joy every single second. On the contrary, you got to live every single one of these emotions, and life hands you things that you don't expect. And when you can actually live these emotions and learn from them with the people that you love and offer up the suffering that you have for the people that you love, that's a full life. But that's just not a pleasant life at every moment. And that's not the point of happierness, is pure pleasantness.
Well, you're putting the research to this. It's helped me conceptualize this, even that aspect of if we were just happy all the time and that was it, no negative emotions, we probably wouldn't make it far. You point out Dr. Spock in your book, and, in real life with no emotions, no feelings, no pain, he would be, I think you said, they cited he'd be dead in a matter of weeks, if not sooner. And that makes sense. So in this, I get that. And I was reading your book. I thought about the concept of bittersweet. That's what these last 11 days have been. They've been bittersweet, incredibly sweet, sweet times, incredibly meaningful as we came together and talked about what really mattered amongst the tears of pain of he's going to be gone. And this is going to change a lot of things dramatically. So much pain for my mom and the expectations that she had. And she's going to go through a period of life without her life partner. But it made me think of bittersweet, which we had, probably been a couple of years since Susan Cain was on the show with her book.
Phenomenal book, really
phenomenal book. And this brought me back to it, to what you're saying, that the sweet, even to the point, and I couldn't pull it up, Arthur, but I almost wondered if it was your buddy, Bob Walding, who we got on the topic of saying, can we even, is our happiness, let's say, our good feelings, our positive, is it equal to our negative? And so if we have not had the challenges, if we have not endured pain, not that we're going out looking for that, but to the amount that we've experienced, that is probably to the amount that we can experience equal happiness. Is that a fair ascertain?
Yeah, it's fair. It's the truth is that you wouldn't really know what happiness is were it not for the bitter times, were it not for the disappointments and the tragedies. And from those tragedies actually come your sense of what the meaning of life is. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a life of contrasts, and it's supposed to be that way. And, if you go to look at the internet or, go to campus counseling services, if you're on a college campus and you say, I feel anxious, I feel sad, they'll say, something's wrong with you and we got to treat you.
Yeah.
Well, if you told me, Kevin, my father got a bad cancer diagnosis, we got 6 months left, I'm feeling sad, I wouldn't say there's something wrong with you. If you said I'm not sad at all, then I'd say there's something wrong with you. That's what it comes down to. And the point is, because I've been there, man. I've been there. My father got a bad cancer diagnosis many years ago. He was a young man. He was 66 years old. He had just retired. He was looking forward to a long time with his wife and his grandchildren. And he went to the doctor and it said, it's the same thing. Look, at some point, the doctor says, you need to come into my office. I need to talk to you. There's no good news coming after in that part of the conversation, and he died really, really young. But in the last 6 months, he said something to me that really had an impact on me that probably is kind of reflective of what you're experiencing right now and are going to over the next 6 months. He said, if you would give me a choice, because he was a statistician, he was a PhD biostatistician. This man knew his numbers. He knew the odds. He said, if you had given me two choices, one in which I'm just going to be on the bell curve, and so I'm probably going to live a lot longer, but I'm going to take my chances on everything, or a sure bet that I'm going to see my kids grow up as fine Christian men who love their wives and raise their kids. I'm going to get to know my grandkids. And I got that for sure. And die at 66. I'd take door number 2 in 10 seconds. My guess is that all the good things that you've done with your life, Kevin, and all the good, satisfying things that your father has done and the happy marriage that he has had, that he would say, yeah, I'll take this path, which is what good men do. And that's painful.
Yeah.
But that's part of what we get to learn. And that's part of the life and life itself.
It has been interesting, as there was almost this feeling of, okay, the deathbed stuff, give us your best. And it's been, I'll give a testimony to him. It's been neat to hear. He's considering some of that, but he's also feeling like, I've been doing that. I've been giving it. And that's been sobering to look at, consider our own lives. With this, Arthur, as you talk about, okay, happiness is not just this ethereal thing that you may or may not find, or you're just trying to flit around, and there's some concrete aspects of it. In that, give us your definition, what is that? Because I think we do want to. I sometimes feel like it's like too many options. You know, when you go to the restaurant and there's 50 options, it's too many. And when we say, "Oh, happiness is just however you define it,"
right? That's not right.
God, yeah. So help us.
Thank God that's not right. Because if that were the case, every single person would have to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's how a lot of people treat it. And it's kind of amazing because, the thing that we all most want is not offered on the internet. It's not, certainly. I mean, one weird trick to get happy. Don't believe any of that stuff. It's not provided by the government. It's not sold at Home Depot. It is something that we need to understand and do the work to achieve. And it really comes down to defining it properly. Happiness is not a feeling. Feelings are evidence of happiness. They're just like the smell of the Thanksgiving turkey is evidence of Thanksgiving. Happiness is a combination of 3 discrete, let's call them macronutrients. Just like food is a combination of protein, carbohydrates, and fat.
Yeah.
Happiness is a combination of enjoyment, satisfaction, and meaning. These are the 3 things that we need. Now, back to pain for one quick second. This is one of the things I talk about a lot with my graduate students. I have 180 graduate students. I have 400 on the waiting list. They want to take the happiness class. On the first day of class, I say, I want you to be in touch with your suffering. I want you to understand that there is no happiness without unhappiness. And if you try to avoid your unhappiness, you're going to avoid your happiness. Why? Because enjoyment, it's not just pleasure. It actually takes some deferral of gratification and satisfaction, which is the joy that you get after suffering. And struggle requires suffering and struggle and meaning. Nobody finds their meaning. Nobody says, oh, I know my resiliency and what I can get through unless something hard happens to you.
Yeah.
And this is the most important thing to keep in mind, that all of the elements of happiness require unhappiness. They require a full life well lived. The trick is understanding that, understanding the science, is developing new habits, teaching these ideas to others in a spirit of love. And that's what the book is all about, is exactly how to do that, chapter and verse with specifics.
The thing that stood out immediately when I opened the book and just looked at the contents, I'm looking at it right now. Chapter 1, happy. So again, let me read the title, folks. Build the life you want. And then the tagline is the art and science of getting happier. Then you open it to chapter 1 and it says, happiness is not the goal and unhappiness is not the enemy. That right there is worth the price of admission, or the book, which you need to go and get, folks. But that right there, even as you're touting happiness, you're saying it is not the goal. And I like that right away you say that we look at it as this destination. And it is not. And again, I'll hand it to, I think it was talking to Bob Waldinger about you. And we talked about achievements. I mentioned that. And he says, I still got some big achievements that I want to go after, that I'm pursuing, but I'm much more interested in enjoying the path that I'm on. And you have me wrapped around that here, that of course I wake up excited about these things that I'm progressing towards and that I want to do. And yet more and more, as I've read your stuff too, I'm realizing, well, gosh, the biggest thing is I want to make sure that I had enjoyment and fulfillment in this day, especially when you have a sobering end of life diagnosis or someone. I think it's arrogant to think that I'm just going to be here day after day after day after day.
Yeah.
So am I enjoying today? Is it all, well, go to that, Arthur, because that's a grappling that I find even very wise people having with the delayed gratification aspect. Yeah. We don't want to delay it all out here that we may never get to. So we want some, but reconcile that a little bit.
Well, that really is the difference between pleasure and enjoyment. And that sounds like, kind of splitting hairs, right? But it's not logic chopping. Really, the way that it works, pleasure is a phenomenon that proceeds from a part of your brain called the limbic system. That's a console of tissue deep inside your brain that has really one job, which is taking information from the outside, what you see and smell and hear, which is all autonomic. You're not conscious of it necessarily, and turning those stimuli into emotions. Now, why do we want to do that? Because emotions are kind of a universal language that can tell our conscious brain to either avoid something or to approach something. It's all approach and avoidance. That's what it comes down to. If something is scary or dangerous, or it's a pathogen, or makes you angry, you avoid it. And if it's something that you really want, that's going to give you calories or warmth or a mate, you want it. You approach it. Is what it comes down to. That's what all your emotions are. Is just this kind of is just signals. It's just information. Is really what it comes down to. That's why when people say bad feelings, that's wrong. There's negative and positive only because some things you should avoid and some things you should approach. But then it gets more interesting when we talk about some of the drives that come from the limbic system as well. Things that make you feel good. That's pleasure. The hippies used to have this old saying, if it feels good, do it, they'd say, right? That's the best way to ruin your life. And the reason is because then you live for pleasure. Then you become an addict. Then you become sort of monomaniacally seeking the feeling per se over and over again. And there's a lot of neuroscience behind this. There's a part of your limbic system called the ventral striatum. It's the part of the limbic system that's the reward center, where you drink alcohol or use methamphetamine, or if gambling is your problem, or you have a terrible addiction like pornography, it just touches that ventral striatum again and again, and it can subjugate you. It's not really living. The key is to take the sources of pleasure and add two things to them: people and memory. You notice, Kevin, that beer companies never run commercials of a guy pounding a 12-pack in his house by himself.
Right.
A lot of people use the product that way.
Yeah.
The reason they don't do that is because that's dangerous, irresponsible behavior, because it just looks for pleasure. The way that you turn beer into a source of enjoyment is it feels good, tastes good for sure, but add people and memory. That's why you never drink alone. That's why in the commercial, they're always enjoying their company and enjoying the relationships that they have. Thanksgiving dinner, it's delicious. 5,000 calories, finishing with pecan pie. You don't eat it alone. You don't do that because you're not going just for the sensation, all the stuff going in the hole in your head. No, you do it because you want to be with the people that you love, enjoy it together, and make a memory. So here's the deal. If something gives you pleasure and can be addictive, don't do it alone. No gambling, no alone at least. No pornography at all. Don't drink alone. Don't use drugs alone. You don't ban drugs and alcohol necessarily, at least legal drugs, and certainly not alcohol if that's your thing. But don't drink alone, because you want enjoyment, and only enjoyment will give you the happiness that you seek.
It just reframes things, which is the point here, that, and your line actually that I was bumbling with a minute ago is happiness is not a destination. It is a direction. It's a direction. Again, that path, which it's interesting, Arthur. I live up, my house is at 9,200 feet above sea level, up in the Rocky Mountains. I mean, it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. I'm not going to negate it in any way, but it's interesting. All the fun. So we're kind of at the top. I mean, Pikes Peak is in the distance, but we're kind of at the top. All the fun is on the way there. I mean, up at the top, you're just kind of at the top. But we're like going back down. That's where all the trails are. It's the journey there. And so often, again, when I look at that goal, that happy thing that's going to make us happy, and to realize, not, again, to discount it. So I've had some goals that I've achieved that have been incredible. But for the most part, man, it was going after them. So if I don't enjoy that, you get some great stories in the book about somebody. I was just reading something this morning about somebody you had a woman who was like a C-suite exec and just knocked out of the park, but just at some point got tired of it and then realized how it wasn't real meaningful in retrospect. And then the other guy who was an accountant and then became an Uber driver. And as I've got kids that are going off into their careers, the thought of, my gosh, why make sure that you enjoy the direction? How's that going to pan out? Just because you're good with numbers, you think accounting is that fit you to sit in an office and do X, Y, Z. How are we to depict that? And we don't do that. We just look at what is the pay, what are the benefits, what's my status, what's that going to add out to, which you actually come to at the very end of the book, the things that derail us. We'll get to there in a minute. But they get in the way that are the obstacles to our actual happiness. And right. We don't consider that. It's so, how did we lose this way that happiness is the number one flagship? And I feel like you're showcasing, not that that's your point. I mean, you're cheerleading us in the opportunity here, but you're also showing, oh my gosh, the gap that we now have is larger than ever when it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting thing because it probably never has been, it's not ever that human beings have understood this. And the reason is because Mother Nature really doesn't care if we're happy. Mother Nature she's pretty tricky, I have to say. I mean, she's good at her job, but it's not being honest with us. Mother Nature really only has two goals for Kevin and Arthur and every single person listening to us, which is that we should survive and pass on our genes. That's all she cares about, is survival and gene propagation. We want to be happy, and we're born with urges for survival and passing on our genes. And so we make this misconnection that if I do the things that will make me survive and pass on my genes, like, eat that whole cake, right? That I'm going to be happy. And it's not true. Happiness requires that we take a divine path, that we're more quintessentially human and less animal. Now, even if you're not religious, it comes down to the fact that you need to use your big, meaty prefrontal cortex, the C-suite, and not just stay back there in the limbic system saying, if it feels good, do it. It's very important that we understand that. And if we do that, we can make our decision-making is so much more intelligent. Case in point, one of the things that Mother Nature tells us is if we have goals in life, that if we hit the goal, we'll be in perfect bliss forever. No, you'll like it. That's satisfaction after you struggle for something, but it's not going to last. And we need to understand that is the journey per se that we need to not just enjoy, but we need to savor. That hitting the goal won't do it for us. And very interesting research that I've participated on over the years about when people are on a diet. People go on diets all the time. They want to lose weight, obviously. And it turns out that almost every diet works. They almost all work. They're all effective. Why? Because you don't eat what you want and the scale goes down. And the reward for not eating what you want is a lower number on the scale. The problem is when you hit your goal. 95% of diets fail because your reward for hitting your weight goal is never eating ever again for the rest of your life, which you like. Congratulations.
Right.
So it's no good. And that's the key thing. If you're living for that goal, if you're living for that, paycheck, you're thinking that finally when that person says, I do at the altar, that your life will be completely blissful after that. If you finally get to California where it's sunny all the time, that you'll never suffer ever again, you're going to have a rude wake-up call. You need to understand happiness differently. That's why the science is so critically important. It's so interesting too. You can design your life around the things that really will bring you happiness, as opposed to what Mother Nature makes you think will bring you happiness.
Again, it goes to that direction. So like with you, I mean, my gosh, you are, I would have to say you're kind of man on fire right now. A lot of things happening, but the path that you're on, you've been on, and I assume you're going to look at that and go, this is the path that I'm going to stay on. And there are some things that I'd love to see happen along the way. But it made me think, as I was reading your book, of Lord of the Rings. So we're one of those families that watches Lord of the Rings most every holiday season. Yeah, nice. And the last one, and they're up there, and Aragorn's king, and he says, and now we enter the days of peace. And as much as you want the movie to go on, what would you watch? They're playing shuffleboard in Rivendell. I mean, it'd be boring without some quest. We want the path to go on. And again, it has me sitting here thinking of reading your book, seeing my dad, to go, I want the path. I want some achievements along the way. I want some goals, of course, but they're not they can't be an end in and of themselves. Yeah, it doesn't make sense, but man, we don't conceptualize that. We are so lost in this, which is why we need this book, of course.
Yeah, no, it's pretty interesting because I talk to people all the time, my age or older, who are getting ready for retirement. And what happens inevitably is that they think that, I've struggled and striven and I've worked so hard. And when I stop, it's going to be great because I'm going to be in Florida and I'm going to play a lot of tennis. And then it turns out that, it's great for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then, these guys, their wives are like, I'm marrying you for better or for worse, but not for lunch, And then it's like, go do something. Stop following me around the house. And they don't know what to do because happily ever after turns out to be a little bit of a nightmare, quite frankly. And so the whole point is your whole life is a journey. It's not a question of your destinations. On the contrary, look, I believe there is a destination. It's called heaven, but it's not on this earth. I'm going to be with God at some point, right? But, it's not going to be this side of heaven. That's the point of my religion, but it's also the point of how Mother Nature wires us. You've got to set up your life so that you're doing the things that you do. The doing per se has a ton of meaning to it. A whole lot of the science of happiness is all about how you do that.
Okay, I was about to start in with the story, but let me ask you a question first. What are you looking towards in regards to retirement?
Yeah. Well, retirement it means different things to different people, to be sure, but it doesn't mean just never working again. The happiest people when they retire, what they all have in common is that they stop their regular job because they can't afford to keep doing it because they're too busy. That's what all happy people have in common. In other words, it's all, they're being pulled away from work. They're not getting pushed out of work is what it has. And because they have so much stuff they want to do with their kids. They have so many things they want to volunteer for. They have boards and mentorship and projects, and it's just they're too busy to keep working. Is the way that actually is. And that's an important thing for us to all to pay attention to. Most of us are going to have tons of years, after we don't need to make a living anymore, or we're in the privileged position of having a pension where we don't have to. Now, again, you never know. My dad thought he had years and years. He died at 66.
Yeah.
Your dad thought he had a couple of decades left, maybe, or at least a decade, and that turns out not to be the case. So you always have to be ready, right? Yeah. You have to have your eulogy virtues written, not just your resume virtues, man. That's really important. You'd be paying attention to that, and your dad did, and good for him. But not everybody's doing that. But in the meantime, it's like, what are you doing so that when you stop working, it's because, man, I can't keep doing this because I'm not going to be able to do the stuff I really want to be doing. That takes thought and commitment and planning, and all of us need to be engaged in that.
Yes, and it's a conviction to me to go back down again to your 3 ingredients of happiness: enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. I had the privilege of being involved in the latter days of Zig Ziglar. Yeah. And he had an injury, had a bit of a brain injury, but he just wanted to keep doing what he did, writing and speaking. And they realized, man, the way to keep Dad alive as much as we can is let him do that. And he did. He wrote and he spoke until the very end. And I've seen my dad known that his view on retirement is, what would I retire for? I'm doing what I love. I find enjoyment, satisfaction, purpose. Yeah, maybe I don't do it as much as I did, and I don't have to do it for income, but my gosh, this is what I enjoy. And what more would I want for myself? And as I think about my kids, I don't know that I would want more for them. Even within that, again, and you point out enjoyment, satisfaction, purpose, that none of those 3 are easy things to have, to achieve, to do. They're not risk-free. They are work and effort and challenge, which is by proxy. It's not just all, as you say, constant happy feelings, and we miss that.
Yeah, no, there's a mistake that a lot of people make, a lot of young people make, who are ambitious and smart. They're real strivers early on, that they believe that if they achieve some worldly success, that their happiness will come automatically. And that's another error that we have to dispense with. The truth is, if you shoot for happiness, you'll be successful enough. But if you shoot for success, you won't attain happiness. That's the key thing to keep in mind. And it's really important because that's not what business schools teach. That's not what the internet, that's not what most self-improvement people are talking about. And it took me a super long time to figure that one out. I mean, I'm a total workaholic, success addicted, self-objectifying maniac, Kevin. I am, the reason I do this work is because I want to cure myself of this. There was years and years and years I worked 80-hour weeks. Years and years and years I worked 80-hour weeks. And I made plenty good money in the whole time. And I finally figured out, like, yeah, but what are you missing? I worked that 14th hour instead of the first hour with my kids when they were little. You know what those little ingrates did to get back at me? They grew up.
Yeah, fair.
And now I don't screw it up because I'm a grandfather and I'm going back. And I talk to each one of my adult kids on FaceTime every single day. And I see my grandson almost every day. And I'm not going to screw that whole thing up. But the whole point is that you need to be taking into account these things early on, making the correct decisions early on. So there's not, you don't basically run out of time. And so you can actually set up your life as you get older that revolves around the institutions of love and not the institutions of faith, of money, power, and the admiration of other people. These are empty promises.
Yeah. I want to jump back to, you mentioned it a minute ago, emotions. So you give a good amount of focus to that in the book. And you said it a minute ago that those are signals in essence. I mean, again, as you know, so countercultural. No, emotions are reality. Right. When XYZ happens and somebody infringes upon my life, or, there's things that we can be victims of. There are big traumas out there and things that happen. And yet when we look at those, we inherently just believe our feelings. This is what happened and this is what it meant. Right. And to challenge that, I find, is even to those who want to understand it, it can feel offensive. And no, but that's reality. You've just taken that away and minimized my experience when you say, no, you can choose your emotion. And I know you're not as flippant as that either. I mean, again, I've read the book, but I want you to dig in there, because I look at that as, this is something we talked about. This is not new news. We're not getting it. It's not resonating.
Yeah, I know. And part of the reason is because our culture is a very feelings-based culture, which is really weird, given the fact that you think that as knowledge and particularly knowledge of science becomes more common, that we would have a much better understanding of the neuroscience of how emotions actually work.
Yeah.
So emotions are just information. That's really all they are. They're information about the outside world that you get to use in making decisions about what you're going to do. That's what it comes down to. It's just like the numbers in your bank account. All that is information, and you use the information that's coming from the numbers in your bank account and your bank statement to decide what you're going to do. Like, am I going to go to Disney World or to the beach? Am I going to buy this house or that house? Am I going to go out to dinner more or less? I mean, this is all Dave Ramsey's talking about. Living within your means actually getting information from your bank account and acting according to it. Same thing is true with your emotions, is what it comes down to. This is incredibly empowering, by the way, because people go through life being managed by their emotions as opposed to managing their emotions. And you absolutely can, when you realize that the true conscious you is not the limbic system of your brain. The true conscious you is in the prefrontal cortex of your brain, the bumper of, the most evolved brain tissue in your head, which is right behind your forehead right here. And that's where you're processing your decisions and making your jokes and deciding what things mean. And then you start to use your emotions as an input to that. You say, yeah, but you have to get space between you and your emotions. You have to get comfortable with the fact that you are not your emotions. You're a person with emotions, just like you're a person with a bank account. That's what it comes down to. You're not your money. I mean, good news. It's like, good news, folks. You're not your money. That you can't be objectified in that way, or at least you shouldn't be. And when you can get some space between these emotions, you can start making decisions that really make sense for your life. But that takes a lot of technique. That takes a lot of practice. When people have been going through life saying, oh, I feel this, so I'm going to act this way because what can I do? They're my feelings. Well, the answer is what we call in the book metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's using your prefrontal cortex to manage your emotions by understanding your emotions. And we have a huge suite of techniques in this book about how to do that. Everything from journaling, which, when you write about your emotions, you have to be in your prefrontal cortex. You can only write in your prefrontal cortex. To meditation, many people have meditation practices where they contemplate their own emotions. To prayers of petition, when you're talking to God and say, Lord, these are the things that I feel. Help me understand my emotions and help me manage these things. You're in your prefrontal cortex, man. Just the neuroscience of prayers of petition gives you a ton of power. This is really important for all of us to understand. Your emotions are truly important. They're dignified. They're great. Bad and good, man. I mean, negative and positive, but don't take them for more than they are. Don't reduce yourself to those data. It reduces you to be less human than you actually are.
It's easy to say. It's such a mind shift to do it. The last chapter of my book, What Drives You, I look at having people replace the word need. Like, I need to go to this meeting. I gotta pick up the kids. With want.
Yeah.
It's so difficult and uncomfortable. I want to, like this. Hey, you know what? I want to go. It's been good talking with you, but I just want to go. Well, we don't want to say that. I gotta go. I gotta go do something. And so changing that reference. So to what you just said on emotions, the powerful, but so again, it doesn't make sense to our heads, again, in our culture, that we say, I am depressed.
Yeah.
I am depressed. Not I'm feeling depressed, but I'm depressed. I'm sad. I'm so angry. So all of me, this is who I am. This is my reality. This is the completeness of me. And we say it constantly. And it's so difficult to say. I think it was Anthony DeMello, which is a guy I read a lot of. And he said, "Oh, this emotion is, whatever, sadness. Sadness is visiting me right
now." Yeah. I am experiencing sadness right now.
Yeah.
I'm experiencing sadness right now. Or even better, if you can see yourself at a certain remove. Kevin is feeling fear right now. That's a really important one, because then you're seeing yourself sort of from a little bit of a distance. And in so doing, you're able to analyze it. One of the things that one of the exercises I have my students do is to list their sources of fear. Now, why? Many of my students suffer from anxiety. It's an explosion of generalized anxiety among young adults today. And there's all kinds of reasons for it. The internet and social media and the way that they date. And look, man, I mean, life is just an anxious business is what it comes down to. But you have to understand, anxiety is literally nothing more than unfocused fear. Fear is a basic negative emotion we've evolved to have that keeps us alive, but it's supposed to be intense and episodic. When you're afraid, it's supposed to be, it functions, your limbic system has a part in it called the amygdala. We've all heard of the amygdala. That's signaled when you hear a twig snap behind you and you don't immediately say, I bet that's a good friend of mine. No, man. I mean, your amygdala lights up and this just sets your whole system on fire. Within 74 milliseconds, you have stress hormones pouring in your brain and you're off and running. That's how fear is supposed to work. It's not supposed to be vague and constant, but that's how we've maladapted it in the modern world. So the way that you actually make it better metacognitively is not just to say, I'm anxious. I'm an anxious person. No, you're not. You're a person experiencing anxiety. Get out a piece of paper. Write down the things that are freaking you out. Number one, what is it? What's freaking you out? Write it down. Make the words come into your head. Say, why am I feeling that? Mm-hmm. What's the worst thing that can happen? And what will I do if that happens? Then go on to number 2. I'm telling you, you won't get to number 5 because you're going to start feeling a lot better by focusing it, using the power of metacognition, moving the experience of your anxiety from the limbic system into your prefrontal cortex the way it was intended to actually be experienced. And then you'll be a lot better.
Okay. I want to go right there. You said the experience of your anxiety. I've played with this analogy before. So we live out in a national forest and we have the occasional bear that comes along. And if we look at just perspective, how we look at something so the objective reality is a bear walked out of the woods. That's it. So my experience over here is, everybody, come on, check this out. Get it, hit the deck. Let's go out and see this bear. I mean, I'm just excited and whatnot. My wife is, oh my gosh, lock the doors. Yeah. Get everybody upstairs. Yeah. Okay. So that's something that we could say, okay, we get to choose our emotion. There's no right or wrong. Both of those are relevant to some degree, excitement and fear. Those are relevant to that thing that didn't actually come to a manifestation of anything negative. So we get to choose that. So that's what's generally happening. I don't know. You could give a stat. I mean, when the day-to-day issues of emotions that come along, I would say the majority of the people that are going to be listening to the show that are not in survival mode for the most part, it's amongst stuff like that is arguably benign, and we get to choose our emotions. Now, though, let's go to the other side of that, or to the exaggeration of that, and say, instead of that, the bear actually got into the house, grabbed one of my kids, took him off in the woods, and we lost the child. Right. Okay, that's an objective reality that there was a bear that came out of the woods and the kid died. And now to say that, you still get to choose your emotions, which I think you would, but it's a very exaggerated spectrum of doing that. Okay, play with that, because I think people can often get hung up and go, okay, I can hear you when it's a benign thing in your perspective on a bear in the woods. But this actually happened to me, this tragedy, this trauma, this abuse, that happened. Really? You're going to tell me that I can just choose the emotion? Yeah.
So it's worth keeping in mind that your brain isn't very good at distinguishing between those two scenarios.
Yeah, right? I read that in your book. Yeah.
I mean, your brain doesn't know, like, real bear in the house, or I saw a bear and it freaked me out, even though I'm up on the deck and it's down there. Right. What happens is, I mean, the gradations of threat are not very, or actually more to the point, somebody might hurt me and somebody is saying a mean thing about me on social media. you tend to react in much the same way because our emotional hardware, our brain is actually not evolved to make subtle gradations between real life and social media. People get very afraid about social media, for example. And the result is we need to manage our emotions such that we can make those distinctions even when our brain isn't making those distinctions. When a bear is carrying off the kid, man, you need all hands on deck emotionally. You want cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine to be pouring into your brain, and you want to be running out in the woods. Yeah, totally. You don't want to calm yourself down.
Right.
But when something is going on social media and somebody's saying a mean thing about you, you need to be able to say, this is freaking me out because I can't quite distinguish between, I can't do these gradations naturally, biologically. And so I need to actually consciously say, this thing is stupid and doesn't mean anything, actually. Social media is stupid and it actually doesn't exist. It doesn't exist in real life. When I look away, it's a vapor and it's gone. That's the reality. And I need to use my intellect and my prefrontal cortex to distinguish between these two experiences. And too many people today, they're not doing that. They just say, I know what I feel. And since I feel it, it's real. And that's not right. And that's also no way to live.
Okay, let me ask you about distinction then. Well, about that we have, because I just gave those two depictions of, here's a bear, we could get our perspective on it, and here's a bear that actually did something of harm. Right. Would you say that as we look at our pandemic of unhappiness, in essence, if you were to throw a percentage out and to say, look, 95% of what we're dealing with is what we're allowing to infringe upon our happiness is this benign stuff. We have for the most part, so few actual manifested big T traumas that are happiness that are making those are blatant and maybe even easier to deal with than these little termites that we don't even understand. And that's the majority of what we're dealing with is this. I keep saying the word benign. I don't know if that's a fair word, but
well, certainly, yeah. I understand exactly what you're talking about. And with some emotions, that's true. With fear, that's absolutely true. We're completely freaked out about stuff that's actually not a big threat. We're actually not afraid of things that often are a threat. As a matter of fact, people do all kinds of things. They're smoking cigarettes. People are still smoking cigarettes. People are still drinking too much alcohol without fear, right? And they're really super afraid of, what somebody might say about them on social media or whatever it happens to be. And that's because they're discombobulated. They're not calibrated in the right way. They don't have enough information. And they also, quite frankly, are not, well taught is the way that it turns out. But there are other ways in which we're actually paying attention to the wrong things, and it's really, really hurting us. So, for example, we have a lot of loneliness is really a form of sadness that comes because that we're not connected to the people that we love. Most sadness is a disconnection from the things that we want or the people that we love. That's what sadness is, and it uses a part of the brain that's that functions to process pain, called the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. That's a place in the limbic system that makes you feel affective pain. Like, I don't like it. If you break your arm, the part of the pain, like, I hate this pain, that's your dorsal anterior cingulate cortex. Same part of your brain when you're lonely is what it comes down to. I'm in pain. I feel lonely. I don't like it is what it comes down to. Now, the main reason that we're so lonely and loneliness is increasing and there's so much more social pain is because of all the dumb habits that we have. And so it's not just a question of moderating the pain and saying this pain isn't real. We have to say this pain is real and is coming at us because of something that we're doing. A lot of the times what we say, you go to the doctor and you say, doctor, I can barely breathe. I smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. He says, well, don't be an idiot. This is a classic Dave Ramsey thing, right? Where there's like, I can't make my monthly payments. Right. And then he goes through their budget and it turns out they're doing all these unforced, stupid financial errors again and again. That's why he's so hilarious and so wonderful to watch. But the same thing is true emotionally. When I find somebody who's lonely, inevitably they're addicted to social media. Inevitably they're addicted to social media. And the reason is because they don't have enough eye contact and touch in their lives, which gives them a scarcity of a neuropeptide called oxytocin. Mm-hmm. That you need to actually feel fully alive. You only get it from eye contact and touch. They don't get enough of it, so they binge social media where they get even less and they get lonelier and lonelier and lonelier is the whole point. So a lot of times it's not a question of saying this is a figment of my imagination, a lot of times with your emotions, you should metacognitively study your own emotions and say, what am I doing that's giving me this emotion in such a heavy dose? And what can I change in my life to make my life better? Your emotions are your friends.
Well, and again, I'll have to give a call out. I've done it so many times to one of the few people I have not had on the show yet, which is Brene Brown. But my therapist had me get her book, Atlas of the Heart, to help me expand my vernacular and understanding of emotions. And I literally find myself going back to it because I cannot come up with what I'm feeling. So I'll go and read through the contents of her book again, where she depicts 87 emotions there. You know, Arthur, I mean, you talk about the 3 ingredients of happiness, and you then also, I'm going to state it, I don't know if you state it this way, but I'm paraphrasing at least, is, and then you're saying, and you also have a propensity for a relationship with happiness, and you actually give us a test. I sat there in the plane and did it. Do you say it? PANAS? P-A-N-A-S?
The
PANAS.
Affect, negative affect sequence.
Okay. Right. Which I took it. So go get his book and you can sit there and just do it in a handful of minutes. Or I did type in PANAS test and it comes up with like psychology resources or something like that.
You can also get it on my website at ArthurcBrooks.com. You can take it for free. Anybody can take it for free on my website.
We'll edit out what I just said. Don't go anywhere else but Arthur's site to get it, because that's why I have it on the show. So go there and take the test. So it comes out and shows you, is that fair to say kind of your relationship to happiness or a predisposition?
Emotional profile, which has to do with the fact that we all have the same emotional palette, but we have emotions that we tend to experience in naturally different intensities. Okay. So some people feel negative emotions very intensely, some people weakly. Some people feel positive emotions very intensely, some people weakly. And you can kind of characterize people across 4 different dimensions in the population of equal proportion. People who are super high affect people, they feel everything really intensely, high positive, high negative. That's called the mad scientist, right? Are you a mad scientist, Kevin?
Yeah,
I can tell. I can tell you're a mad scientist. Now, part of the reason is because what you do for a living. I mean, you've got a podcast, you're very expressive, you're super interested in everything, you're intensely curious, which is a superpower. The downside is that you're going to feel negative things really intensely, and your wife is going to be like, you exhaust me, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I don't know if we want to go down that trail. It's interesting how I've maladapted probably to that, Arthur, which is because I want to be, well, so let's say that. So I know you're a mad scientist, you know, reading the book, you are too. You feel, whereas Oprah is a judge, which is really the opposite.
That's the opposite. That's she has the same emotions that we have, Kevin, but she feels them in lower intensity.
Yeah.
And that makes her very sober, very unflappable. You know, she's the kind of person that can deal with all. I've seen her under enormous stress. I mean, incredible stuff in the past year that we've been working very closely together. I've seen her go through things that, holy mackerel, she's feeling it, but she's okay. I'd be freaking out, man, because I'm a mad scientist. She's a judge. That's low intensity. You have people who are high intensity positive and low intensity negative. Those are cheerleaders. That's a quarter of the population. And people who have high intensity negative and low intensity positive, those are the poets. Everybody has their strengths, no matter who you are. I mean, it's more fun to be a cheerleader than it is to be a poet, but the world really needs poets because they have incredible strengths with creativity, with respect to what they teach other people, etc. And the point of the book is you take the test and you understand yourself, so you can wire to your strengths, you can remediate your weaknesses, and you can surround yourself with people who help complete you.
And that was great. I love that you showcased that with yourself and Oprah, your opposites, and what a great team that you make. And I know she talked about, I think it was her like best friend Gail or something that is.
Yeah, she's at CBS this morning, and she's a
cheerleader. Right. And she said, you guys make a great team. And again, I love the honoring that you do of these. There's not a right or wrong. There's not a bad or good or whatever, but the understanding them and knowing how to work with them. I will, to your question of me, I feel a little bit adapted to myself because I wanted to be the judge. I have apparently valued the judge. I want to be that. So what I do is try to shut down the emotions. And I did some brain mapping just a couple years ago, and they said I had an overabundance of alpha waves that they said made sense, and that I'm constantly trying to shut things down. And so that was part of my therapy. So I'm going to assume, but I didn't know the mad scientist thing till reading your book. But it makes sense that I do feel so much, and yet I didn't grow up in an expressive culture where you just, let those things go. So I was always dampening.
Yeah. No. And I get that. But that's the reason, by the way, the intensity of emotion that you feel. I mean, and it can be maladapted, but also it's very beautiful, because that's why you're a good entrepreneur, quite frankly, because, you're sensing big things every place. What you need are people around you who are like, Kevin, let's just take it down a couple of notches. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Oh, when the negative affect is coming up. And you'll bring people up on the positive side, and you need people who can help you manage the negative side, because you'll feel things probably a little bit more deeply than other people do, and maybe frankly, a little bit too much. That's certainly the case in my case, where everything is great or terrible. There's no shades of gray.
I mean, your book is broken up into, I'm looking at the contents here, and we've been talking a lot about the first part, managing your emotions. And it's just I would say it's the foundational, doorway into this. Then you get into building what matters. And I really gave a lot, this is my show. I get to go where I'm interested in this aspect of focusing less on yourself. Focusing less. Actually, before I come into that, though, I did skip over it because it's a part of that here, of your research that you did on what makes us happier. Just pleasing myself, in essence, going pleasure and serving myself, and not to discount that self-care. I've grown in that a lot. And there are things that I do for myself more than I used to, and I think to great benefit to myself. But in just a study on happiness and overall well-being, you did that. And people who were just doing things for themselves, as opposed to, and I'm not getting into the minutia of people over here who gave focus to serving others, in essence, which we tend to look at as this altruistic, self-sacrificing thing. And I'll let you tell the results.
Yeah. So this is work that's going on at Northwestern University. A really fine psychologist named Adam Waits has done experiments where he wants to know what actually makes you happiest. And he had 3 groups of people that were randomly assigned, like a drug test, into 3 different groups. The first group was assigned to do random acts of kindness. They had a list of things that they could just go do for other people. The second group was supposed to think lovely thoughts about other people. These are the kind thoughts group. And they're supposed to kind of meditate or pray for other people and just think about how good those other people were. And the last was the self-care group. They were supposed to go do things that really felt good to them. They really like go get a massage or go get a ice cream sandwich and do the stuff that you really like to do. And what they found was that, but not even close, that random acts of kindness won. So number one is like the happiest you can be is by just go do stuff for other people. Go do kind things. It's like some people often say, I don't like my job. I feel like a drone. And I'll say, okay, tomorrow afternoon, 2:00 in the afternoon, go to the break room, get a cup of coffee and bring it to the person in the cubicle next to you and say, you look like you could use a fresh cup of coffee, and see the look on their face and see how it actually sets your heart on fire. It'll turn you into that dude in the office that does that stuff, because you're going to like it so much you're not going to go back. The second group in terms of happiness was the kind thoughts group, and in the rear was the kind to me group. Now again, there's some people who never do anything nice for themselves. There's some, but not very many people. Most people are walking around saying, what do I want? What do I want right now? And if you basically start redirecting that impulse toward other people, it's just all this wonderful effects that we actually find neurocognitively. So for example, when you're doing things for yourself all the time, it's like looking in the mirror, Kevin. It's like me, and my thoughts and my worries and my desires and my cravings. And it's like staring in the mirror the whole time. And that's unhealthy for you. It'll also drive you crazy and drive your happiness down. When you're doing things for other people, get rid of the mirror. You're just looking outward at life. You're looking at other people. You're looking at the majesty of existence. You're being touched by the music that you hear and moved by the conversations that you're having. When you do this, it automatically reorients you from inward to outward. It goes from the me self to the I self, or I'm not the object of everything. And it's just a much better way to live.
Why? And you use that word observing. Am I just observing me, or am I observing, out here? But okay, so to take that then, and I don't know that this is the word you use, but I looked at, and one of the antidotes to unhappiness is focusing less on yourself, which again seems to be counterintuitive. Man, if I'm seeking happiness, what on earth can I do to make me happy? Can I go see a movie? Can I have a drink? Can I have a smoke? Can I have sex? What can I do? Those things aren't bad, but if you want to be happy, you're saying go help other people, which is interesting because that's been an interesting aspect back to Anthony DeMello, which I could reference him on just about everything, but him talking about we don't do anything selflessly, not truly. Everything we do, we get something out of, and just own that. And so when I go give money to the homeless person or do this altruistic thing, it's filling me up. And don't pretend that it's not. And you're saying, it makes you happy.
Yeah, it absolutely. And, my own research that goes back now decades is on charitable giving and volunteering. And one of the things that you find is that the number one way for you to alleviate loneliness is to go help somebody. Loneliness is alleviated by, in other words, loneliness is really like, I want love. Give me love. I want love. I'm not getting enough love. Go give love. That's the way that you do it. Give the thing that you want to get. And again, Mother Nature is not telling you this. Mother Nature is like, you feel lonely? Cocoon on the couch with a fuzzy blanket and a pint of Haagen-Dazs and binge Netflix. That's wrong. That's just bad advice. The answer is to go find somebody who's lonely and help them is what it comes down to. Do something. It's like, my youngest daughter is a junior in college. She just transferred. She transferred from one college to another college. And that's hard in your junior year, right? Because everybody who's a junior has friends. They all have a million friends. And my little girl didn't know anybody. And so the first thing that she did is she signed up to go volunteer. And she was delivering furniture on the part of a charity to people who were, immigrant families who were moving in and didn't have anything. And she's yucking it up with the other people who are carrying furniture around, and she's meeting these people, and she's a native Spanish speaker, so she's able to communicate with a lot of the people, and it's just phenomenal. And you know what? Her Mother Nature would have said, no. What you need to do is you need to actually wait for somebody to be nice to you. And she didn't. Because she's a psychology, neuroscience major, and she actually knows my research.
I just dawned on me too. So I mentioned Zig Ziglar, I think earlier. So his son, Tom Ziglar, is one of my dearest friends. And I know out of the blue here, every now and then, sporadically, I'll get a note from him. Hey, Kevin, just thinking about you. So grateful for what you've done for me and what you've meant to me in my life, and just hope you're having a blessed day. So one time I asked him about that, because I know he does it to other people. So I said, what prompts you to do that? And I didn't think about it till now. And he says, it's usually when I'm feeling down that I do that. Yeah. Again, counterintuitive. Of course, Zig Ziglar's son would be the one to do that. I had not really put that together, but it is the exact opposite of what we tend to do.
Yeah. What you find is that the happiest marriages are the ones when one of the partners is not feeling love, they give love. That's a signal. It's called the opposite signal strategy among psychologists. And so if I'm not feeling warmth toward my partner, that's when I actually give greater love toward my partner. And so I have an account with 1-800-Flowers. That's how bad a husband I am, Kevin. and so I just that one touch and flowers come to my house, my own house. And when flowers come to the house, my wife always calls me and she's like, "What's wrong?" Not like, "What did you do?" It's more like, "Why are you mad?" Because obviously you must be mad about something because you actually sent the flowers, because I have an opposite signal strategy. If you are experiencing emotional avoidance, that's when you choose emotional approach. Mm. That is the secret, man. It's hard. And a lot of people but if you're managed by your emotions, you can't do it. If you're managing your emotions, you can do it.
Well, and again, I would point again to the book, folks, that's why you need to get it and study it, because this is not something you're going to hear and go from this podcast and you got it. You won't get it. This is going to take, it's probably going to take forever. It's going to be a process and a path.
Yeah, it's a program. It's a really a fun project, actually. I find that I have all these students that are there, MBA students at Harvard. I mean, they're going to be, the masters of the universe, basically. And a lot of them are like, what I really want to do is this stuff. I want to do science of happiness because it's like a hobby. It's like you get to work in your hobby for the rest of your life. And anybody who's listening to us, I mean, there's all kinds of entry points into the literature, into the science. You can just go to my website and start learning about the science, as a matter of fact, and it can become your hobby. What's your hobby? The happiness science, and sharing with other people. It's so rewarding.
Your book ends with build what matters. I want to hit one more piece here, though, in this aspect of what we're talking about, focusing less on yourself. In essence, one of those was stop caring what other people think. Yeah. Okay. Again, pithy to say, and yet I want to take the opportunity to dig in there. Because on one hand, I get the science of it, if you will, of if I can retain my self-worth in and of myself, or depending on your faith, as unto God, that my self-worth is not dependent on out here. Right. That I would say is beautiful and is the goal in essence here. Now, there is validity, and that's what I'm going to ask you to reconcile a little bit. There is validity to get feedback from others on some things. And I don't know why my head goes here, but it's the back in the day when we used to watch America's Got Talent, or whatever it used to be before that, American Idol or something like that. And you'd see the little town princess come out, and everybody thinks she's a great singer and she's just going to be the next Celine Dion, and she sings, and it's terrible. And somebody needed to tell her. It's so great that she thinks so much of herself, and so does her mama. But somebody online said, you know what, and I started playing with that to say, you are an amazing person. Your self-worth is intact, and you may have it in you to be a good singer. Currently, you are not. Maybe you haven't done enough work yet. You haven't had the right help. This is not who you are, but you do need that. So, but grapple with that, because I feel like we talk about that don't care what other people think, in essence. And yet we intrinsically do. And I think part of us knows that there is validity in some constructive criticism, if nothing else. Yeah. But play with that cutoff.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, if you literally didn't care what anybody thought of you, you would be living alone in a cave.
Yeah, psychopath, I guess.
Yeah, and you would be, and actually it turns out that psychopaths, believe it or not, they care a lot what other people think of them. Yeah. What they don't have is remorse when they hurt other people. And that's what they have. And so the result is that people love them and then hate them, is the way that works. The psychopaths have a very interesting relationship with the opinions of others. But we do need the opinions of others because we have to live in society. We have to live in a family. If you didn't care, if you felt no pain in the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex of your brain, where the social pain is actually processed, if you never felt any pain there, you'd have no colleagues, you'd have no family, you'd have no friends, because you wouldn't care. And so the result is you wouldn't do the things that actually are required for you to maintain a relationship and a job and a career and family, etc. But most of the time, we go way outside of the boundaries of the people that really matter, whose opinions actually matter. And we pay a ton of attention to the opinions of people who don't matter for anything having to do with our excellence or quality of morals or life. That means strangers. I mean, people actually care what a stranger thinks of your hairstyle, which of course is nuts, but it's evolved. It's an evolved tendency. One of the things that we want is we want the admiration of strangers. And that's an inborn tendency because it's more likely to get you mates, 500,000 years ago in the Pleistocene period. If you were a super alpha dominant male, you might have 75 children in those times. And then most of the males would have no children. But, we didn't set up our society. Thank God, Kevin, that we're not doing it that way anymore. Yeah. It's like, we have these families. Life is better. And so the result is we don't need to be impressing people on social media to give us compliments and looking at our mentions and all the things that we're actually doing. So the way to deal with this is to think about it, to be metacognitive about it. We're all pulled toward the admiration of other people. This is a very natural tendency. But we don't have to act like that all the time. And being conscious of what our tendencies are so that we're not distracted from things that really matter is super important. For example, I know a lot of people, they should be paying a lot more attention to what their spouse thinks of them and a lot less attention to what people on social media think about them. And if they actually could say, I'm making the decision to not care what people think about me on social media, and I'm going to get rid of this account, and I'm going to take that time and spend it with my spouse, their life would improve dramatically. but they're getting the order wrong because they're being managed by their tendency to care about what other people who don't matter actually think. That's why metacognition really matters. And that's why ordering these things and thinking about these things rationally can be so unbelievably generative and helpful in our lives.
Goodness. Yeah. And it has gotten me thinking continually about who I am seeking feedback from and how so often, even sometimes some of those closest, they don't, I can take the closest people to me. And then back in the day, if I had to ask them about how I was doing, or how I could improve as a pro cyclist, they don't know. They're not the people to go to. I need to go to my colleagues. And that you're not here asking me for my advice or thoughts on you as a professor, because I'm not that, and I'm not there. And
I care. I care. You got a big podcast, and you're a guy I admire, and you do really good work, and I care what you think about my work. But if I asked you about the technical details of my research, the mathematics of my research, you'd be like, I don't know. And if you did have an opinion, it wouldn't be the kind of opinion that could be useful to me. And we need to be discriminating about these things. Furthermore, it's a lot of it is the idea of feeding our egos because of these primordial urges that we have. And that means just wanting to be, quite frankly, admired by strangers. I want people to like me who don't even know me. That's this, right now, the number one career goal of sixth graders in the UK and the United States is YouTuber.
YouTube, I heard that. Yeah.
Oh man. It's like, and a big part of that is that people want to be famous for being famous. Yeah. And the reason for that is because we have all of these means for social media to hijack our brains, to hijack our limbic system, to put ghosts in our emotional systems. And the only way that we can fight back, well, there are all kinds of ways that we need to be fighting back that we're not right now in terms of public policy and in terms of parenting. But we also need to fight back on our own by saying, no, this isn't right. This is making me miserable. This impulse is a natural evolutionary impulse, but it's not helpful to me. It's not going to make my life better. It's going to make my life worse.
Okay, to turn that back to you and give you credit for your book, you land then on, it's literally, I'm reading it, the idols that stand in the way of. So go back to happiness, folks, where we start at the beginning, and the ingredients: enjoyment, satisfaction, and pleasure. Those are the ingredients of happiness from Arthur's research. So the idols that stand in the way of those are, and we were just hitting on them, in essence, money, power, pleasure, and prestige.
Yeah, or fame or admiration, right? It's the good opinions of others.
Yeah.
Yeah. Money, power, pleasure, and fame, man. That's what people want. And the reason is because, as most neuroscientists and social scientists will remind us, that's what evolution programmed into us, because those are the things that bring us calories and mates and survival. Mm-hmm. That's the reason. The problem with that is, if these are your end goals, they won't bring you happiness. If happiness is your goal, you'll get enough of those things. Now, enough might mean less than you get if those are your goals, to be sure, but don't you want a happy life? Now, it makes people panic a little bit. Like I'm telling them to abandon their ambitions. No. You'll have a plenty good life. But going for the things that actually bring happiness, and I know we're coming to this in the conversation, that they're not those four: money, power, pleasure, fame. Those are the bad four. Those are intermediate goals. There's nothing wrong with money. It just can't be the end goal. It has to be something that you use to get you to the real goals, the real four goals that all of the happiest people have in common. You want to talk about those, the real four goals?
Yeah, I was going to say, just shoot. Yeah.
Faith, family, friends, and work that serves. That's it. Those are the big four. Those are the portfolio. That's the happiness 401k plan, my friends. If this is the happiness version of Dave Ramsey. What are you going to invest in? Faith, family, friends, and work that serves other people. By the way, I don't mean my faith. I'm a Christian man. It's the most important thing in my life. Yeah. But I can tell you that there are people who don't have Christian beliefs or any religious beliefs, but they're transcending their day-to-day life, which means that they're zooming out and thinking about the big picture of the why of life. Maybe it's with Stoic philosophy or walking in nature or meditation or whatever. Or for me, it's the faith of my youth, but you need it. That's what I mean by faith. Family is pretty self-evident, although a lot of people are not availing themselves of the mystical ties that you didn't choose. Friendship means real friends, not deal friends, and certainly not virtual friends. And last but not least is the only thing that matters in work, which is earning your success by creating value and serving your fellow sisters and brothers.
Yeah.
And newsflash, every single person is your sister and brother.
Well, that was, and I pulled out a couple of the things on that. I mean, yeah, you start out with a family, and and I really appreciate that with each of those four things, you start off with, I'm going to say, the admission of, and you realize how challenging it is that your family. I love the story that you started off with, that you asked the lady, what makes her just most happy, what gives her the most joy? She said family. And then you followed up with what gives you the most pain. And she said family. That was beautiful. And you pull out some of the biggies like conflict, and unforgiveness. That those are the things that rob us of that. So I appreciate you pulling that out. Like, let's not pull any punches. You got the cards on the table. Let's call a spade a spade. This stuff is really difficult. But at the end of the day, that here we are with family, friendships, work, and faith, which, you have me thinking about. It's my relationships with those that matter. Well, I guess you could say that with all of them, couldn't you, Arthur? I mean, even we go to the idols: money, power, pleasure, prestige. And then we come to what we really want: family, friendship, work, and faith. That even the first four, it's not bad, is what you were saying, but it's our relationship to it. Our relationship is what matters with all eight, in essence.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's like, there's nothing wrong when you're driving to New York City of passing through a rest stop and getting gas there, but you don't stop permanently at the rest stop. And that's all money, power, pleasure, and fame are. They're just a rest stop that you use to help you get to your ultimate goals. And if you stop there, you're going to be like, my life is so unsatisfying and I can't figure it out and I don't understand it. And I guess I needed more. Kevin, I just needed more money. I needed $2 billion, not $1 billion. I needed, 6 million Instagram followers instead of 3 million Instagram followers, or whatever it is, right? And that's an incorrect conclusion that we tend to make, because Mother Nature is urging us in that direction. And we need to say, no. It's because I had the wrong goals all along. They were incomplete goals. They were intermediate goals. I need to go all the way to the end. Faith, family, friends, and work. Faith, family, friends, and work. And then you will find the bliss that you seek.
So much of this will be another show, which actually we want it to be on attachment. Just on attachment, and looking at them and looking and going, again, these things in themselves, good, bad, whatnot, but it's our, again, relationship, I guess is the other word, but our attachment to them. And as I'm looking at it, you've got me thinking about all of them. Again, we started this show with the story of my dad, and again, so pithy and elementary to say, but we did not spend the last 11 days talking about the need for more money or power or pleasure or prestige. We talked about family, friendships, meaningful work, and how meaningful his is and the people that he's touched, and then faith, which I appreciate. I do want to tell you that, Arthur, that's come up in a lot of shows, was your writing, your testimony in your book, Strength to Strength, on the power of faith. That seems to be a continual thread that comes in as we're in this world of, personal development, self-help, growth, whatever you want to call it, that I feel like we're in an age where we're seeing faith I think it's been lagging for a while.
It's been marginalized. Yeah. And
yes,
it's kind of a nice to have, is how people think about it. But
yes,
the neuroscience of religious experiences is very, very, it's getting clearer and clearer that this is something that if we neglect our spiritual lives, our transcendental lives, our philosophical lives, we're just going to be leaving a ton of happiness on the table. Again, I'm not saying that somebody has to be a Catholic like me. I love it. I invite anybody, give me a call, but there's a lot of ways to actually scratch that itch. The whole point is you can't just be in your individual psychodrama where you're the star all day long. You got to zoom out, man. Life is big and broad. And the only way to do that is with transcendental experiences.
Well, I want you to share with us, you have this online workshop, The Art and Science of Happiness, which is the science of happier.com. Just talk about some of the ways that people can engage. I mean, obviously, I'm promoting the book, and we're going to do that. I want everybody to get, I think I have 3 copies myself now, and we'll be sending them to more people, especially in light of what my dad's going through, what we're going through with him. So to dig in further, scienceofhappier.com, tell me what's happening there.
Yeah, that's just a version of a lot of the information that I've been sharing widely for the last few years. So we have a video series, a workshop that people can can watch with activities around it and learn a lot more about the science of happiness. And with those videos, they can stop them and start them and go back and look at it as much as they actually want. It's 10 half-hour videos. So it's really meaty is the whole idea. Because most people, they don't have time to take a college class in this, quite frankly. And a book isn't enough. So if you're like me, part of the reason I did this is because, frankly, I learn most by listening and talking. Right. And so I decided to create a series of materials that are complementary to all of my books that will allow people to actually think and talk about these things, to, get maybe even download some media, to share some things with the people in their own lives, to hear me talking about some of the, the things that are quite technical, but in a simple way. What's happening to your brain when you're falling in love, for example? What is the actual way to buy happiness according to the data? These are the kind of questions that we actually dig into, not just the big theoretical questions, the applied questions that people need to get more happiness in their lives.
Well, so folks, again, I'm going to lead you to the book is here. I'll hold it up here I think it's behind me, but here's another one, is Build the Life You Want. And if you need to, you can walk into any bookstore. I did that. It took me about 10 steps to find it front and center. And of course, anywhere you find Oprah these days, I saw her on TV a couple of times talking about the book. You can go get it. And then this new online workshop, The Art and Science of Happiness, is at scienceofhappier.com. I know you got value out of this, and I ask you to let us know. Go to Apple Podcasts, leave a review, and don't talk about the show. Talk about what you got out of this episode. You can see us. You can see the whole video here at YouTube, and we'll have a bunch of clips online. You can find me at kevinmiller.co. And of course, if you want to learn more about your own drive, find my book, What Drives You, on Amazon. And until next time, folks, stay driven. Thanks, Arthur.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah.